Hey everyone, it's me, the guy who decides to not upload for like 7 months straight sometimes. And recently, a new Fire Emblem game got announced. Now, I'm sure some people might be surprised because I don't talk about it a lot, but Fire Emblem is actually my favorite video game series. I've been rewatching the trailer for like the last week, and I've been coming up with a lot of different thoughts, so I wanted to make a video going over them. This isn't necessarily going to be a breakdown analysis of the trailer, although there will be some of that. This is me basically just yapping for however long this video ends up going for. So this is a good background noise video if you have to fold some laundry or something. We don't know too much about the game yet. As far as I know, there hasn't been a press release to expound upon the details, so whatever is in the trailer is all we have to go on. Which is a bit of a shame. I think a few more details will end up invalidating some of my initial impressions, but life goes on. To start off, let's talk about the title. So we now have Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, the now 18th mainline title for the series. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that title. It sounds a bit intriguing, but I don't think it makes a lot of sense without the story context. It sounds like it's loosely based on a Chinese poem, sort of like how Fire Emblem Three Houses' Japanese title was. But it's overall fine. Not overly long, it sounds like the title actually means something, so I'm on board with it. At this moment in time, it just seems odd. But then again, we let them get away with calling a game Fire Emblem Three Houses, so anything is better at this point. But as for the game content itself, absolute gut reactions. What was I thinking when I first saw the trailer? Overall, I was pleased with what I saw. I liked how you couldn't tell immediately from watching it that it was a Fire Emblem game for certain until you saw the strategy board. I liked the look of the character designs. I liked the vaguely Greco-Roman inspired setting. The fact that the story is going to revolve around some kind of tournament is very interesting to me. So there is a lot to look forward to. There are a few things I'm concerned about, perhaps a lot more than other people, but we'll get to that. Overall though, the game does look pretty cool. I'm certainly not as excited for this game as I was when Three Houses was first revealed. I think that Three Houses was exciting because it was the series really challenging what a Fire Emblem game could be for the first time since the Super Famicom era, and that was evident in the first trailer. Whereas Fortune's Weave I feel like isn't pushing the series forward as drastically, even though there are some neat ideas I'm seeing. That being said, I am certainly more excited than when Engage was announced, so Fortune's Weave has that going for it. To be honest though, I am equally as concerned as I am excited. There's a few things implied in the trailer and promotional material which sort of rub me the wrong way, albeit without any real justification on my end. The bigger one is that this game takes place in the world of Three Houses. A part of me, as the trailer was coming out, just immediately thought, wow, Engage must have underperformed so much that it scared them back to the setting they know works. But it's not entirely unprecedented that a sequel to a previous game in the series is made after another entry, such as Shadow Dragon and Mystery the Emblem, or if you want to be really technical, Awakening for that matter. So I'm willing to be charitable about it, but I do hope they'll retire the setting after this game. But I mean, it's obvious that it takes place in the same setting. Kai is speculated to be of Elmyran descent. Theodora is wearing a headdress that looks to be made of dragon bones as they're depicted in the Three Houses universe. Diedrich has a crest weapon and a lot of evidence that he's related to Mercedes and Yuritsa. Leda is able to summon demonic beasts. Sothis just straight up appears on her throne at the end of the trailer. And this is something which I'm probably going to be going against the grain here, but I'm completely split down the middle whether or not I'm okay with that. More so against it when the trailer released, but slowly turning to be more positive. Three Houses was already a big game if you played the entire thing. Three Hopes added even more time to that. And if we want to split hair, Byleth being in Smash and Three Houses being represented in Engage, I personally feel like we've already spent a lot of time in Fodlan, so I just kinda wanted to move on from it. We don't know for certain if this game takes place in Fodlan or maybe Elmyra or something, although I think it makes the most sense for it to still be Fodlan. We also don't know when it takes place, if this is a sequel or a prequel. If I was a betting man, which I am, I would place my money on this being a prequel. That's just my gut reaction. With the Colosseum, I just get a very ancient Rome feeling, perhaps providing some form of implication that this is the past. The other clue is that Sothis is an adult here, which I think actually makes for really strong evidence that this does take place in the past. Counterintuitively, I suppose. But if you have played Three Houses, hopefully I won't have to spoil why I think that's the case. In general though, I think it makes the most logistical sense for this to be a prequel. because that way you don't have to acknowledge any of Three Houses' routes as the canon one, and you don't have to worry about Byleth and canonizing a gender for them either. Speaking of routes though, that is my other concern with this game. The other thing that's got me a bit worried is that there's strong evidence that this game is going to feature multiple routes again. The marketing is really pushing these 4 characters, so I think they're going to have a lot of equal level of importance as protagonists. Multiple story routes have been kind of a pillar of the series since Fates, but if you need a refresher on some of my opinions, I do not like the whole multiple routes as a framing device, and at this point I think it's worn out its novelty. And even though the story of Engage was poo-poo doggy doo-doo, I am really glad that it was a single route and focused on a story that was willing to rein in its ambition. But I will acknowledge that between Three Houses and Three Hopes, the implementation of multiple routes got way better. So if they are going for that again in Fortune's Weave, I pray they now have the experience needed to fully realize it. That being said, I don't see a character that is implied to be a self-insert avatar. These characters all seem to have backstories and motivations that are entirely unique. So I do hope that remains the case. I hope they do phase the self-insert characters out of these games. I want the series to go back to having definitive leader characters that are allowed to be flawed and confrontational. Although that does make me a bit curious how they're going to handle the player choosing which character to follow without having a player insert. Maybe they'll just have you choose which character you want to follow at the start of the game, or maybe they'll even do something like Radiant Dawn where you periodically switch perspectives between the protagonists. I'm not entirely sure. This is definitely the part of this game that has me the most curious right now, and has the potential to still please me. One thing that did catch my eye is that this game is showing off a lot of story cutscenes. This is very interesting to me. If you've played a Fire Emblem game, you'll know that most of the cutscenes of the games are a couple characters just talking directly at each other, which doesn't make for good marketing material. Engage certainly had a lot more choreographed cutscenes than any Fire Emblem before it, although that game only had a single story route to worry about. So I'm actually a bit hopeful the story's going to be playing a much bigger role and will be given the cinematic treatment I've wanted to see from the series. Also, the lady in this cutscene here just has a straight up gun. Does this mean that the funny GBA crit animations fans make of characters just pulling out a gun will be canon? I sure hope so. The combat seems interesting. It looks like there's going to be some kind of new system where you sacrifice HP of units to perform special movement or combat options. It looks neat. I'm sure it's going to open up a lot of potential for high-risk, high-reward strategies, but there's not too much to go off right now. And to be honest, nothing blew my mind here. Nothing here shook my reality like Three Houses' first trailer did. Not to mention that a lot changed between the Three Houses' first trailer and the final game, so who knows how these systems are going to develop and change a year from now. The game is releasing in 2026, I'm guessing summer at the earliest, although I wouldn't be surprised if that gets pushed into fall. I'm hoping they give this game all the time it needs, because as beloved as Three Houses was, it was obvious that game wasn't finished. As for the team who's making it, we obviously don't know. We probably won't know for certain until the game comes out. Nintendo recently has loved being tight-lipped about that kind of thing and wants the games to speak for themselves, which I kind of understand, but it doesn't stop me from being curious. For those who don't know, Three Houses began full work after Shadows of Valentia came out in 2017. And while Intelligent Systems oversaw and directed the project, for the most part, the game was developed by Koei Tecmo, specifically the team responsible for the Nobunaga's Ambition series, while Engage was being developed simultaneously at Intelligent Systems. The last Nobunaga's Ambition game came out in 2022, so about 3 years and some change is certainly more than enough time to put a Fire Emblem game together. So if they were the ones making this game, I would certainly say the timing makes sense. That being said, Engage was rumored with pretty convincing evidence the game was completed in 2021, so let's just say they were done in 2022 just to be safe, which kind of doesn't narrow down the possibilities here. So that leaves us with 2 guesses for who's making this game then. The first and probably most likely answer is this game is being made internally at Intelligent Systems. From what we've seen so far, the game looks polished. If you look at the general user interface, it does bear a lot more similarities to Engage than it does Three Houses. Which would mean that this game is also being made in Unity, which I'm sorry, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. As long as the game looks and runs fine, which Engage absolutely did, it's just absolutely comical to me that actual, real, official Fire Emblem games are being made in Unity. The second possibility is that they've once again outsourced the work to Koei Tecmo. They have a team working on the upcoming Zelda Warriors game, and some of the Nobunaga's Ambitions games are getting switched to editions. So it sounds like they have development kits. And Koei Tecmo was just an insanely efficient game studio in general. They probably could pump out a Three Houses sequel pretty quickly. And since they already made Three Houses, they have the experience, which means they could probably do a better job this time. That way, Intelligent Systems is free to work on something else, say the constantly rumored Genealogy of the Holy War remake, which that's probably copium. The remakes never have really been successful for this series, and although we could debate why, I think it's just too much of a gamble for these games when they're getting more expensive and more time-consuming to make. Especially since Intelligent Systems just tried the nostalgia play with Engage, and that didn't do well for them anyway. And pro tip, if you really want to play Genealogy of the Holy War, you can in fact go play Genealogy, as early as today even. So I'm not really sure it's worth remaking. Especially since Genealogy is such a wacko game that is very likely to get misunderstood by modern Fire Emblem audiences, but I digress. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Fortune's Weave whenever it comes out. That being said, I don't actually own a Switch 2, and while a new Fire Emblem game is certainly the most compelling argument I've seen to get one, I'm just trying to hold out for the system to have a price drop before then. That was a joke, you're allowed to laugh. Hopefully the game won't cost $80 though. If it does, I will have to put my foot down and exercise my right as a consumer in a capitalist society, saying, I'm interested in this game, but I'm not interested in paying that price for it. But who knows, we'll have to wait and see. But until I get a Switch 2, or at the very least find some way for me to comfortably play the game at my own pace and record footage of it, the eventual Fire Emblem Retrospective Part 18 is on indefinite hold until that's figured out. But that's okay, because when that video comes out, I want it to be as good as it can possibly be, if not the absolute best analysis of Fortune's Weave you'll ever listen to. Oh, and Kai, sorry to say, but your father has very low chances of survival, bro.